All right, well, if you're here to learn about the Oldham Reserve, you're in the right place. So thank you for joining today live, and then also thank you if you're watching this later on. I know the noon time isn't always great for some people, but glad we're able to record this and have it available later as well. So we're here to provide some information and open up a dialogue about the Oldham Reserve. This is a public property jointly owned by Oldham County and the City of La Grange. I just wanted to take a moment and acknowledge that it's been exactly 1 year since this pandemic officially began. So that's going to sit differently with each of us here today. But right now in this space, what we're hoping to focus on is coming together as a community. So of course, community is always really important, but we believe especially so now. So moving into this informational session, I just want to point out that the work that we do as government employees and public servants working in Oldham County is for the purpose of supporting this community, and public input and participation is really essential to that. So we thank you for being here again and for your input, and hope that this will be the beginning of this dialogue. So we'll get started. So our outline today is myself, Becca Trueman. I'm going to talk about an overview of the Curry's Fork Watershed, which the Oldham Reserve is in, as well as some initiatives that we have going on specific to the Oldham Reserve. And then David Bizianes, he is the Oldham Chamber President. He's going to give an overview of the Oldham Reserve, talk about the history, ownership, planning, and goals. And then Kiersten Fuchs with Resource Environmental Solutions is going to talk about environmental and green space management. So I do have a poll I'm going to launch, and then in the meantime, if you can type your name, if you're on the Zoom session, if you can type your name in the chat, that would be really appreciated. For the work that I do, it is grant funded, and I need to count time as match, and so your participation here will help us with that. So again, appreciate if you could put your name in the chat. And so if you're on Facebook Live, you probably can't see this poll yet. I'm going to end it in just a second. We've got a few more that haven't put their answer yet. So the question is, why are you interested in the Oldham Reserve? It's a multiple choice. I know there's lots of reasons why you might be here today. So just looking at getting a sense of who our audience is. Okay, and I'm going to end the poll. And then everybody should be able to see those results. I'm not sure if that's going to show on the Facebook, but let's see. So we've definitely got a mix of people here today looking at interested in the Oldham Reserve. It's public property, quite a few people that live near the Oldham Reserve, quite a few people interested in recreation, walking and biking, work connected to the Oldham Reserve, and quite a few for being interested in green space and conservation, as well as being interested in what's happening in the property and having a say in what's happening on the property. So great. So hopefully there wasn't a reason there that I didn't put, but if there is some other reason that you weren't able to reflect in this poll, feel free to, oh, there we go. Sorry, I wasn't sharing it yet. Feel free to put that in the chat. And then if you have questions, again, feel free to put those in the chat as well. All right. So as I said, I'm going to spend a couple of minutes just talking about the interest that I have as watershed coordinator for Curry's Fork in the Oldham Reserve. I thought it was important to show us all where the Oldham Reserve is at first here. So the Oldham Reserve, it's this purple outlined property. So this is a map of Oldham County. It shows the city boundaries, the city limits. So we have La Grange here. So the Oldham Reserve is within the La Grange city limits, and it's this big chunk of property that's just south of 71 here. So you've already heard the term watershed and Curry's Fork watershed used quite a bit already. So I think it's just important to remind us what a watershed is. So a watershed is the area of land that drains to a particular point along the stream. So a watershed, it's the way that we describe land boundaries where all the water that flows within that boundary travels to the same point. So as watershed coordinator, the work that I do, it's focused on specific streams and the area of land that drains to those streams. So that area of land we call the Curry's Fork watershed. And of course, you are always within some type of watershed boundary. So the Curry's Fork watershed here, so the same map just overlaid the boundary of the Curry's Fork watershed here in blue. So it includes a good chunk of La Grange as well as the Oldham Reserve. And the Curry's Fork watershed, it's about 29 square miles. It's fully within Oldham County. And if you're familiar with other streams, then you probably know the name Floyd's Fork. So Curry's Fork ends up draining into Floyd's Fork, and then eventually it makes its way to the Ohio River. So this Curry's Fork Watershed program, the program that we have that's focused on Curry's Fork Watershed and the streams within it, it's managed by Oldham County Fiscal Court, and its purpose is to improve the streams in this area. So it started in 2005. It's been a program that's been around for quite a while now, and it's a very unique program. There's not unfortunately, there's not a lot of programs that are very much watershed specific. So we are unique, and I'm thankful that Oldham County has taken the initiative for so long to have this program. So I am an employee of Oldham County, and I work within the engineer's office. And so this program, it's, and I'm just kind of giving some bullet points here to give you an overview, but it's a collaboration. This program is working with government agencies, organizations, businesses, residents. So working with the stakeholders, those that we say live, work, and play in the Curry's Fork watershed. And then the projects that we do, they are driven in part by our Curry's Fork watershed plan, which outlines what we need to do to address our water quality issues, which I'll mention here in a second. But they're also driven by stakeholder input as well as public interest and participation. So you might be wondering, so why the Curry's Fork watershed? So I did mention that this program is unique, but the problems that led to the need for this program are not so unique. So of course, water quality concerns are found all throughout Kentucky as well as the United States. But when we're looking specifically at Oldham County, the streams in the Curry's Fork watershed are the most concerning. So when we talk about our stream health, the issues are that our streams do not meet water quality standards. So they're considered a potential risk to human health as well as a problem because they don't provide adequate habitat for wildlife. So those are two really important factors that we consider when determining if our streams are meeting standards. And then this image here, if you don't recognize that, so this is the Mississippi Basin, and that's all the land that ends up draining to the Gulf Coast. So you might have heard of the dead zone in the Gulf Coast. So we're part of that here in Kentucky. So what happens here actually eventually leads to that. So it's all connected. And then what's happening in our streams, it's an accumulation of what's happening on the land. That's why we're focused on not just the streams, but the land that drains to those streams. So we know that failing septic systems, sewer overflows, animals in our streams, lack of vegetation along our stream banks, and so on, this contributes to issues like loss of land and flooding and algae blooms. And this is all connected back to that issue of when we describe it, saying our waterways are not meeting standards. So in terms of what we're doing about it, there's several kind of high level initiatives that we have. So this is sort of the general way, these main categories that we're breaking up our solutions to address ultimately our issues we're finding at the streams. So education and outreach, stream restoration and stream buffers, on-site wastewater, so that's our septic systems, green infrastructure, stormwater management, and land conservation and protection. So we're hitting this at all the angles we can to ultimately get to that point where our streams are healthy and meeting those standards. And then back to the Oldham Reserve here. So one of the reasons that as watershed coordinator, I've taken an interest in the Oldham Reserve is that there's really not that many places in the Curry's Fork watershed where we can access the streams. Most streams are on private property. And so the Oldham Reserve is a really ideal place to work, to get people involved. It's a public site and there's a lot of streams on this property. So we've got two main initiatives we've been working on right now. The first is improving stream buffers. So like I said, there's and you'll see a map later from Kiersten. So there's quite a few streams on this property. And a lot of this property, if you go to this property, you can tell it used to be farmland. So there's some help we can do to improve the streams. And part of that is by planting more trees and building back up our stream buffers. So we're doing that as volunteer events. And then the other initiative we have that we're trying to pursue is creating a public trail system out the Oldham Reserve. And as of now, we've applied for funding to do that. And we're fingers crossed hoping we get that funding. So that's where we are in terms of that step. And then I just wanted to make sure to pitch what else we have going on. I've got my email here. That's the best way to reach me. We also have our local watershed group, Friends of Curry's Fork. Anybody is welcome to join on this. We meet monthly. We have our Facebook page, YouTube, the standard social media outlets. And then we have a lot of upcoming events this spring that, again, anyone is welcome to join. So I hope if this interests you at all, you will connect with us. And that's all I have. I'm going to stop sharing my screen. And then next up, hi, David. Next up, we have David.
Hi, everyone.
So David Bizianes, he's been really great to work with, really supportive of what we're trying to do here in Curry's Fork. And he's the president of the Oldham County Chamber. And I will let you take it away when you're ready.
Great. Well, thanks, Becca, and thanks everybody for zooming in, and glad to see all the interest in the project, and glad that Becca was able to coordinate this to give us a little opportunity to kind of communicate some of the good things about the development that are going to enhance the quality of our community. Just before I get going too far, just to tell you a little bit about my position or my role here, and on this call with me is Sandy Hamilton, who works with us in this office on economic development, and she's very involved in the Oldham Reserve project as well. And Kiersten, who has gotten us out of a lot of sticky situations with her expertise. We're glad to have her here too. Our Chamber of Commerce is not just the Chamber of Commerce. We're also merged with economic development, and we're kind of a pseudo private-public partnership. So we are governed. We are not technically employees of fiscal court. We are hired by the board of directors, of which we have 15 on our board. And about half of our funding comes from fiscal court, City of La Grange, and the City of Crestwood for economic development services. And then the other half of our funding comes through private donations, top investors, local businesses, any money we can make off of the programming and events that we put on. The idea with the chamber is that we have a way to connect people so that they can grow their business. And then with economic development, we're trying to attract new business and work with our local employers to expand, create jobs, and expand the tax base so that we can have a good tax environment for the community. Our staff serves as the staff for the Oldham-La Grange Development Authority, which is the board of directors that oversees the Oldham Reserve project. And that board is made up of 6 appointees, 3 from the city of La Grange and 3 from the Oldham County Fiscal Court. So Sandy and I serve as the staff for that board, and we are intimately involved in all of the details around the project. That board of directors entered into a master development agreement back in 2013 with Hollenbach, Oakley, and Talmadge Hawker to serve as the master developers for the park. And they are responsible for marketing the park and bringing in any new users to the park. Sandy and I, who are responsible for the entire county's development, if we come across a project that seems like it would be a good fit for Oldham Reserve, we take it to the master developers, and they keep us involved in the process, which is a recently with the new project that just landed there was a good example of that partnership. So there's a lot of moving parts between boards of directors, elected officials, city and county. You know, when we have our environmental help and our folks, our local planning and development agencies. I mean, there's a lot of very seasoned professionals that are working really around the clock on this particular project. So, you know, I'm happy to answer any questions, but I thought maybe the first thing I could do is just kind of walk through a little bit of what the goals of the park are, where we are with those goals. And then I can also screen share with you to show you, we're using the planning development website, has a GIS system that I recommend everybody take a look at. If you go to the planning and development website, it's on the front page on the left-hand side. You can get to the GIS, gives you a great overlay of parcels, lets you see, you know, the property in relation to perhaps your property or a business property. So I'd encourage you to take a look at that. The project started in 2005. The goal of the project was to create an atmosphere for business development that was in line with the makeup of the county. So Oldham County is home to the healthiest, wealthiest, highest educated population in the entire state of Kentucky. And one of our challenges is that we have a big portion of that educated workforce that commutes out of the county during the day to work in mostly Jefferson County, but other areas, Shelby, Trimble, and other areas around. And so as we've developed as a residential community, the need for business development growth has existed, so we can vary the tax base, and that some of the services that have to be used for the citizens have some other sort of revenue that comes across. So one of the advantages Oldham County has is we're a very low tax type of county as far as the amount of taxes we have, especially on business. But that also can be an issue because it doesn't give us a ton of taxes to draw from when we need some local improvements or investments. So outside of the property tax and insurance premium taxes, those are really the drivers for revenue through these types of developments. The city and the county purchased the property for approximately $21 million and had issued some bonds to do the purchase. And then a few years later, the City of La Grange passed a compensation tax, which is a 1% tax on the wages of the employees of people in the City of La Grange to manage their debt service on the park. And that debt service should be sunsetted, I believe, in 2023. And so in the meantime, we have had one employer entered the park, which is the top employer of the county. That's the Rawlings Group, moved in here in 2006 with about 500 employees. And since then has added over 1,150 new employees at an average salary of $77,000 a year. When you take those salaries just in Oldham Reserve only, not necessarily the rest of the city, you know, that 1% occupational tax contributes over $1 million a year to the City of La Grange that is able to be reinvested into either the park or to pay down the bond debt. So that kind of gives you a sense of some of the pieces that are at play there. Rawlings grew into a 1,650 employee employer, and it's really important to understand that that's not just a significant employer for Oldham County, that's a very significant employer for the state of Kentucky. That's more employees than Yum corporate and Papa John's corporate offices in Louisville combined. So it's a tremendous asset, and it's also created a little bit of a victim of our own success. The initial infrastructure put in the park, and this is where I'll start sharing so I can kind of point to some things. And I see a couple questions. I'll answer those here shortly. Okay, everybody can see This is the GIS system, and I'll back off the property here. This black line is I-71 northbound. This is exit 22, and this is exit 18. And then Oldham Reserve is right around here. You can kind of see an outline of the shape here, and La Grange Parkway is running right through the middle of that. So you've got the Rawlings Group here at the front of the park, Baptist Health La Grange, Walmart, and then the exit 22 ramps. So within the park, the initial infrastructure included half of a road, or not even quite half, Eden Parkway that extended just past the Rawlings Group. And when they moved in here with 500 employees, that was a lot of people that were coming into La Grange to work. But then as they continued to add more and more people, we started noticing a lot of really challenging traffic along the I-71 exit 22 ramp. I'm sure we've all seen it, to where that backs up down the expressway. It's been very dangerous. It's been improved because of the widening of the ramps, but there's still a lot of work to do to continue to be able to accommodate the flow of traffic in and out. The good news is, between this northbound ramp project, the southbound ramp project, La Grange Parkway, the Louis Dampier Bridge, and additional roads such as the extension, widening realignment and extension of Allen Lane and 393, that there are over $88 million of road projects that are kind of in this vicinity that are geared towards business development. The extension of Eden Parkway, or I'll say the lack of the extension of Eden Parkway, had made it difficult to sell additional acreage in the park, which, you know, kind of gave us a little bit of a negative opinion out in the public for people that really weren't aware of what was going on. The park was very successful. When you think about, if you were to take the Rawlings Group and break it into 16 100-person companies and an average salary of $77,000 a year, that would be a great success within the park. Now, however, that's not what's happened. So what we need to do is be able to make sure that we can accommodate more business growth. And the struggle that had been going on there was to make a public investment to continue the infrastructure was something we believe was needed to be able to continue to have some success. And fortunately, the fiscal court in the City of La Grange decided to finish the Eden Parkway extension. And when they did that, it wasn't very much longer after that we were able to get a new project. The new project that you may have heard or read about is that Trilogy Healthcare is being built by a group called Ramsey Development. They purchased 6.77 acres tract right here. So Eden Parkway will be extended and continued. I believe that is going to open up in May of this year. That road will be connected into La Grange Parkway and be completed. The purchase of the acreage for the Trilogy site created the revenue to be able to build what will be Peak Road running east and west, and the East Peak portion will be completed by June 3rd, I believe is the date on that. In addition to the 6.77 acres that the assisted living facility purchased, they have an option on an additional 3 acres to put villas, similar to the Forest Springs development that's at the, it's just across the county line in Jefferson County as you head out of Pewee Valley. And that if they move forward with that, those would put villas along the golf course there and give some more a view of the golf course and create some opportunities there. So we'll have the addition of East Peak Road and the addition of Eden Parkway completed here by the end of June. We're very excited about that, and any more access that we can continue to create within the property creates more opportunity. Some of the challenges that we continue to have with infrastructure are related to the building of this road brings on a lot more of developable acreage and some different types of sites that make it more marketable. But in addition to that, we do have need of a pump station to be improved. South of Peak Road here, there are going to be some sewer upgrades that would have to happen in order to be able to bring on the acreage here for development to happen in a timely fashion. So that requires continued public investment or master development investment, or some user that would be able to make that investment and putting the infrastructure in to accommodate their project. In addition to that, and one of the most significant road projects we have in the whole county is the addition of the interchange, which would be exit 20 right here at La Grange Parkway. That is scheduled to move forward, and I believe they're going to be moving dirt and clearance of the right of way here this year. So those are some of the road projects that affect the property and around the property. Another thing to notice when you look at the road work that's going on here, the widening and realignment of Allen Lane on the north side of I-71, which will also go underneath the railroad tracks and tie into 146. When you back away from this becomes a full bypass around at what was exit 20 or what is exit 22, and will include an interchange at exit 20, of course. So you're looking at a really major change in how the road system in the City of La Grange works. And then from that, there are additional road projects such as Commerce Parkway being extended to connect into Mattingly Road, and then the extension of 393 to tie around here. So those are the road projects that are going on that are affecting the property. Every one of those types of announcements and funding of those projects that have happened have increased the amount of interest and opportunity for development within the park. In our office, we are of the opinion that these are the things that have to happen in order to make our property a viable property to sell. That being said, that is a common issue in a lot of rural communities that are moving towards development. And it's not just an issue for Oldham Reserve. There's a lot of land available for sale in Oldham County, and much of that has opportunities to develop, but because of a lack of significant infrastructure, is minimizing what we're able to capitalize on. So there's some spots out there in the county that are unrelated to Oldham Reserve. I could share some thoughts on those types of things for, but in order to accommodate a place for business, there has to be an investment of infrastructure to be able to support that. And those changes or investments need to be able to happen in a timely fashion for somebody who has a project that they want to go from no building to up and running and doing a ribbon cutting in a year. We have to be able to accommodate that. Our competition that is all around us, there's River Ridge has an industrial park in southern Indiana, but that also includes about 300 acres of Class A office. Old Henry Road, which also has a lot of Class A office going at the Old Henry interchange. You've seen some of those beautiful office buildings there, and including right, I believe, close to the Summit or the Paddock shops. It's called 2 Olympia, is about 140,000 square feet of office. And of course, given the age of COVID, there's big changes that are happening in the office market. So the future of office is going to be something that's going to go through a lot of changes. And one of the things that we think could be possible at Oldham Reserve is because the topography in Oldham Reserve is very hilly, that it lends itself to some smaller types of projects rather than, we can't get 500,000 square foot big box in there, nor would we want to. But for offices who might be looking at a 30 to 60,000 square foot footprint, this is a really great location for them and has a lot of tremendous assets around. So I'm happy to answer any questions, or is there anything that I'm leaving out? Becca,
I'm curious about Highway 53. I think that it's pretty much, it's very narrow, and it's definitely going to be affected. So is there been any studies on that?
I believe so, and I don't think Jim Urban's on here, our planning and development director, would have more information. I think maybe Jim Silliman's on here. He may know something about that. But there have been studies on the widening of 53. I'm not sure how far down they've gone in that, but that would be something I have to defer to the planning and development office.
It looks like Jim was about to say something.
Yeah, sorry, David. Did you? If I would have to research again. This is Jim Silliman, county engineer. I'd have to research that a little bit more thoroughly. A lot of that study would have been prior to my coming on board with the county. But I think, I think we recognize that a lot of the traffic is going to come from I-71 and 53 through New Moody in that area. Those existing potentially more than the south area, but we can. I can look more into that.
Okay, and definitely the northbound 53 is scheduled for improvements. The widening that happened on the exit 22 northbound ramp, the southbound ramp is going to go through a similar type of widening, but that will also continue up and rework the intersection at Crystal Drive to create some designated turn lanes, and should help with some of the problems on that portion of 53 as you approach the downtown. Other questions?
Well, that was a really great overview, David. Thank you. And then if you have a question, you'll have time to ask it after as well. So why don't we move on to Kiersten Fuchs. Kiersten's a senior project manager with Resource Environmental Solutions and has been working with the OLDA board on the Oldham Reserve for a long time now. So I know Kiersten wanted to talk about the help that they do for the Oldham Reserve with making sure they're following their environmental permits. And she's been really helpful in the work that we're doing with Curry's Fork to improve the streams. So I'll let you take it away when you're ready, Kiersten. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Hi, I'm Kiersten Fuchs with RES. Thank you to Becca and David for kind of introducing the project and giving you kind of an update on what's happening out there right now. You know, my focus of the presentation, as Becca mentioned, that to kind of talk about the balance between the development and the ecological sides of Oldham Reserve. So I'm going to share my screen, and Becca, let me know if this doesn't work. Becca had to teach me how to do this yesterday. So if that worked. Did that work?
It's coming up now.
All right.
Yep, you're good.
Okay. So, so we've been working with Oldham Reserve basically since the inception in 2005. So for a long time, like David mentioned, and you know, we've worked with the city and the county and the OLDA board. Our role is working with them and, you know, identifying ecological features on the site, but also, you know, areas for development within Oldham Reserve, because that's kind of the primary focus. And then also working with the regulatory agencies to be able to get the permits that they need in order for development out there. So, sorry. So a couple interesting facts about Oldham Reserve. As David mentioned, it is a really large site. It's a 1,000-acre site, which is kind of unheard of as far as a single development area. And the unique thing about Oldham Reserve is that it has had a master plan developed for it pretty much since the beginning. And in this master plan, like Becca mentioned, the green management part of it. So within the master plan, you know, there's a framework for developing the property, but also for identifying natural areas to be set aside, a framework for recreational activities, such as, you know, walking and bike riding, and just areas for enjoying nature. So back in 2005, one of the first things that we did for the OLDA board was just to basically walk the entire site and assessing it for streams and wetlands and ponds. We mapped everything out. Another goal was to identify, you know, high quality natural areas such as streams and wetlands, and to see if these could be set aside in conservation easements, you know, for preservation for the future. And we were able to definitely do that. There's over 30,000 feet of streams on site right now that are protected in conservation easements. And then the overall end of our assessment was to come up with a summary map, which is here, that, you know, that OLDA could take a look at and see, okay, these are all the areas where streams and wetlands and ponds are, but then also kind of identifies some areas that they could develop with kind of minimal impacts to those resources. Now the areas in blue, I know it's kind of hard to see. So these are all the areas of streams that were preserved and are preserved now. These are the more high quality streams on the site. So, and then when David has a, you know, a potential opportunity to come for development at Oldham Reserve, such as the Trilogy site, then we will work with getting permits from the Corps of Engineers and the Kentucky Division of Water We'll also coordinate with U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service for protected species habitat. And we just want to make sure that we have all the correct permits for developments out there, and make sure that, you know, that OLDA is meeting all the current regulations. So the other thing we did while we were out there looking at streams and wetlands, we also looked for threatened endangered species habitat. Specifically, we were looking for the gray bat, Indiana bat, the northern long-eared bat, and running buffalo clover. So, you know, a lot of the areas along those protected streams that I showed you do have wooded riparian corridors, and which are fantastic habitat for the Indiana bat and northern long-eared bat. And that is also one of the focuses that Becca has, at restoring that riparian habitat, which, you know, in the long run helps protected species such as Indiana bat. So this is just kind of more of a close-up shot of Oldham Reserve. Again, these blue areas are areas that are in preservation. Some of the work that Becca has done with the live staking and tree planting have been in areas over here. So, you know, so we get the permits for OLDA from the Corps of Engineers and Division of Water. But, you know, with impacts, you know, comes mitigation. You know, OLDA has to provide mitigation for these impacts. And mitigation meaning if you do impact a stream or a wetland, you need to replace the function of that stream or wetland, either on site or off site. So one of the areas that we kind of thought slated for mitigation is this area here. And if you ever hear Becca or David or Jim Silliman talk about Pond 5 mitigation, this is the area right here. There was a large 3-acre pond here at one time, but when the Grange Parkway project was put in, they actually had to drain the pond so they could get this crossing here. And so we took the opportunity of, since the pond was gone, we went back and restored the, you know, the historic streams that used to be there before the pond was made. So, so this, in essence, became a mitigation project for OLDA, you know, to compensate for some of the impacts that they had on site, such as, you know, La Grange Parkway and Eden Parkway. So basically, we restored streams. This is kind of the view of the upstream part of the Pond 5. This is La Grange Parkway. Here's the culvert crossing underneath the road. You can kind of see the old pond bed here. There's actually 2 streams that were restored in this area that come together. You know, this work was done in late 2019, early 2020. Trees were planted out there. Here's this is kind of the lower part of Pond 5 coming down through this way. And so, you know, different features were kind of restored in the stream channel. We restored riffles and pools, and you know, this is June or July of last year. So you can see kind of the trees coming in. A lot of the vegetation has come back. So it's a really cool area. If you do drive, you know, La Grange Parkway 53, it's right there at the intersection of the two. You know, drive by, take a look at it. It's very cool. And this is also one of the areas where, you know, Becca's grant may focus on potentially getting a trail system around here, because we do have the multi-use trails along La Grange Parkway there that we could tie into. So this is you know, an interesting area to expand public recreational opportunities. So as far as, you know, green management, I think Oldham Reserve is unique in that it's trying to focus on both, you know, development, but also to preserve some of the more important parts of the property. And obviously, when these areas are preserved, we want to make sure that, you know, we have some educational signs and let the public know these are conservation areas. This is one of the signs we have out by Pond 5. And you'll see these signs pop up along any of the streams that have preservation areas along them as the park continues to develop. So I think it's a really unique opportunity to work with both development and kind of the expansion of preservation of nature, but also, you know, recreational opportunities for the public. So it's been a great project to work on. So I think that's kind of what I've got, Becca. And I'll let you go. Here, let me get out of sharing my screen.
Great. Well, thank you, Kiersten.
Sorry.
And we definitely wanted to leave a chunk of time in the session for questions and discussion. So I'm glad we were able to do that. So we've got about 20 minutes left of our hour, and we can, I know some people put some questions in the chat here, so hopefully I don't miss any. So I'll start with this one. So let's see. David, did you already address the Highway 53 expansion? Is that what Jim?
We did.
Okay.
I don't know if we adequately addressed it, but yes.
I don't want to skip it, but if there's any more to add to that, feel free. So,
Well, if you don't mind, I'll add, and I
Sure.
apologize for my dark screen. The sunlight is affecting it, but there you'll also notice as you go up and down 53, the interchange there at Blakemore and La Grange Parkway, where one would access the park from that south end, was improved with the La Grange Parkway construction with the left turn lanes. So obviously some accommodation was met for that.
and then there's this other comment I'll turn into a question, I guess. So asking about public area inside the reserve. So is that potentially a piece of this?
Yes. You know, the original concept for the park, the original master plan, you know, Fran Scott locally here was, you know, he'd come up with some of the concepts, and they were back in 2005, they were very forward thinking. Because we see a lot of these types of developments these days where you have a live, work, and play type of environment. So public spaces, including parks, there's been talk of a dog park. There's a lot of opportunities by the way that the property is laid out to incorporate the walking trails, potential mountain biking trails, and all of these type of concepts that are important amenities these days to the development of business parks. You know, the old days of just nothing but glass and concrete everywhere are not part of the models. You know, you've got a lot of employers who are trying to have a real holistic approach to how they manage their employees. And, you know, with the minimal amount of walking paths that are already available down there, you can see, you know, from the Rawlings employees and local people here in La Grange that utilize, you know, that La Grange Parkway is 2.5 miles long, and there's people on that walking piece all the time. So we're glad to see that it's getting utilized. You know, Becca's brought us some opportunities to where maybe we can capture some additional mitigation credits by providing some more of these types of things. So we're excited about that. I know that the mayor and the judge executive both have emphasized that, you know, this park belongs to the public, so we want them to be able to use it while we're trying to develop it and create these jobs. So, you know, there's not a specific, there's some spots that are obvious that would likely be public spaces and maybe park areas. But as far as when that trigger gets pulled, you know, one of the things that's really interesting about developing a park when you don't know what the users are going to be who show up is that, you know, you're trying to design to a standard that may change over time. I mean, the original master plan that was produced in the early 2000s is still holding up and is what we're working under. But, you know, markets change. The retail business has changed astronomically. It was 2007 when the iPhone was invented. So, you know, we had internet purchasing before then, but then all of the retail industry is still scrambling to adjust to those things. That affects commercial development. It affects back office. And then now with COVID and the ability to work from home or remotely, and what type of schedules people will have in the future once, you know, we get to some sort of normalcy after the pandemic. I think we'll see that parks like these are attractive because of these pieces that you're talking about. So hope that answers.
I think so, yeah. A comment to bring in new restaurants, is that a consideration, David?
Yes, it is a consideration. It's something that we actively pursue. We are in an area where there's a lot of growth happening in Oldham County, and that growth contributes to the ability for those amenity type projects to come on. So, you know, when it comes to running a restaurant, especially, again, you've got a lot of restaurants that are struggling and having to really adapt to the changes that have happened. And what of those changes become permanent, we don't know. And then you have the ones that have survived be able to come out of this. But ultimately, the driver of restaurants is foot traffic and traffic. So head counts, road counts. And when you really start to get off of I-71, you'd be surprised that, some of the traffic counts are lower than you would anticipate. Now, that being said, we've had some success with Cattleman's Roadhouse that has moved in, and this is something we've done from the chamber point of view in our office and trying to talk is a lot of the demographics show that any migration habits that people have here locally, that people from La Grange typically don't go to Crestwood. They go past Crestwood into Jefferson County. And then that certainly works in the reverse, where Crestwood people don't come to La Grange. So throughout the pandemic, the chamber has had a promotion with First National Bank where we give gift cards to local restaurants to chamber members to go visit. And we're trying to mix those up where we'll give people in La Grange a gift card to a restaurant that's in Crestwood. So Crestwood has Wilder's Cafe and Crestwood Bistro, which just opened up during the pandemic. And then there's a great Thai restaurant, Taste of Thai in Crestwood. In La Grange, Prost restaurant, we just did a ribbon cutting on. That's a German brew pub. That's a really cool concept. And then of course, if you have any of the Bourbon and Ale House in 119, I'm going to get somebody mad at me by forgetting their restaurant. But the point is that we are having some restaurant growth, and that is something that we expect will continue. As far as the restaurant growth within the park, those types of projects can be a little bit complicated because while we might have some that want to locate in the park, if there's a portion of the park that they want to locate that would require, say, the extension of a sewer line, it could be cost prohibitive to actually be able to accommodate it within the park. That's why we get back to pushing infrastructure. Infrastructure has to be in place for things to be able to happen. And then, of course, the widening of I-71, the opening of the East End Bridge, we have a large, and the impact of COVID and the civil unrest that's happened in the metropolitan area, I think is going to result in continued growth out in Oldham County, which will help with the restaurant growth. And then I've got Sandy Hamilton on here with me. I might toss to her if she wants to add a little to this. Sandy in our office has worked in this type of business and commercial real estate at a really high level for her whole career, and then had semi-retired and moved back to Oldham County, where she's from in La Grange. And we were able to twist her arm and get her to come work with us because she speaks the language of the people that are doing these types of projects. Sandy's worked on the Trader Joe's deal that happened in Louisville. She's leased out Oxmoor Mall and the Summit. So she's got an extensive background in working with restaurants and with retailers. And so Sandy, do you want to kind of maybe offer a little something for people that are asking about restaurants and retail growth? You're on mute though. You're on mute.
You're always trying to mute me, so I'm just used to staying muted. No, David's right. I have spent a long time in the shopping center development world and worked with a lot of retailers and restaurants, including Chick-fil-A. Before anybody asks about it, we're asked about that more than anything else out of this office. But we have a traffic count, a foot traffic count issue here in Oldham County, and being 15 to 20 minutes from Springhurst area, which has virtually everything that we might want, makes it even more difficult because they're not going to cut into the very strong sales that come out of that Springhurst area, whether it be Target, shops at the Paddock Shop, any of those restaurants. So, I mean, David basically nailed it. I've talked to Chick-fil-A, the real estate department, numerous times. We do have Zaxby's floating around looking at a couple things. But I think one thing that will help us is when exit 20 is open and becomes the south entrance, if you will, to Oldham Reserve. We've got inquiries from Panera Bread, and Panda Express and the Chick-fil-A's of the world. And so I think once we really can start building up our daytime traffic, which is important, as well as our population, those things are going to come. It's just still several years away, probably.
And in the meantime, we've got these great independent local restaurants that, you know, I urge everybody to visit, because there really are great restaurants and they're great family-owned businesses, and they contribute a lot to the community beyond the food and the atmosphere. So,
Well, and also too, when I very first started, you know, David made a comment, boy, if you could bring a steakhouse to the market, you'll probably have a statue in the courthouse. And so I knew several of the steak places, and literally about second week, third week on the job, I started working with Cattlemen's, and it was well over a year later before they were open. So that's how long it took to get that deal done. So
and then
these
one
things
more.
take time.
Yeah, one more thing to add on to that, and it made me think of that when she mentioned the exit 20 creates those opportunities. You know, a lot of the requirements that the restaurants are looking for are proximity to the expressway. And so as you get further off of the expressway, the sites that are available are less attractive to some of those larger national chains. And, you know, there are areas of the city that have, there's an obvious property in La Grange that comes up pretty often about why is that thing still vacant? Why can't we get something there? And a lot of the times those are related to landowners who, in that particular case, owns a building that needs to be demolished and doesn't want to pay to demolish it, but will not sell the property. So for somebody to develop there, they'd have to demolish the building, build a building, and then turn around and lease it. And those are just not really good conditions for somebody to invest in. So those things will change over time because the market continues to appreciate. And, you know, as our population grows, as the corridor continues to grow and new businesses open, offices open and employees are imported in, it really does give us a better shot at getting some of those types of establishments. So.
Great. Well, I'm going to skip around here a little bit. I've gotten a couple of questions asking if there's going to be sort of designated kind of walkways and buffer zones as lots are developed, so people aren't necessarily seeing buildings and then they have a place to walk, like the sidewalks.
Yes, I think that's definite. And again, you know, if a lot of people sometimes they'll ask us, you know, we should divide this into lots where you can see what lot you're going to buy, and that's possible to do. The thing that we don't want to do is say that this area of 20 acres is going to be 4 lots. And then we sell one of them to a small user, and then we have a larger user that could have used the whole thing, but we're kind of committed in a direction at that point. So there's a little bit of an art to balancing, you know, where these types of things are going to go, and sometimes you try to adjust them around users. Now there are, you know, for example, the walking trails that have been discussed and the mountain biking trails. You know, there's some obvious places to put those related to utility easements and whatnot that I think we're going to try to capitalize on. So the board was very excited when Becca and Kiersten had talked to us about the opportunity to create that trail system. And at one point, there was even discussion of between the Rawlings Group and Baptist on including some trails between there. So I know that those two facilities are interested in these types of amenities as well.
Right, and I think the important, it really back to the master plan and kind of forward thinking, like David mentioned, was to incorporate these multi-use paths along the major roadways in the park, which you'll see along La Grange Parkway. They have the multi-use trail for bikes and hiking and running, and they're going to have the same thing on the extension of Eden Parkway. And I'm sure if there's another major road or something like probably Peak Road, they do have plans for those. So I think that's awesome, you know, with a road going in, that's a great idea. And then if we can work some, you know, trails, you know, off-road trails networks from there, then I think that would be really cool.
Okay, so I saw there was at least maybe 1 or 2 questions regarding traffic accidents. So I know you addressed this a little bit already, saying there were some studies. I don't know if there's any more you want to add to that, people concerned over increased accidents.
Sure, and I see a lot of questions about residential within the park. The original master plan did accommodate several hundred acres for residential development. However, that's not the purpose of the park. So the feeling with the board and the elected officials has always been, as little residential as necessary within the park, because the goal is to create business development. That being said, there's types of housing that could be useful to the employers. I mean, you've got 1,600 people that Rawlings Group has there. So is there potential for some housing to accommodate them? Now, Trilogy is going to be coming in with 125 new employees. As those things grow, there'll be a little bit more need for that. But I don't think that, there's a ton of will to do that right now, considering that, we feel like we're kind of getting started with some of these projects as far as the business is growing in there. So I think that's on the table, but I don't think that's something that the elected officials really want to pursue at this time, and we want to give our best shot to getting as much business in there as we can. Definitely in the future there will be housing. I mentioned that south of Peak Road there was going to require some sewer upgrades to be able to bring that part of the park online. Without those sewer upgrades, there's not going to be anything going in there anytime soon at all. That's something that we have to work through and, make sure that that's something that is worth the investment, given the opportunities we end up with. The challenge that we have to figure out is, when we have opportunities, are we too late to make those upgrades to capitalize on an opportunity? So it really puts elected officials in a difficult position to have to make those calls, and we try to just advise as best we can, or I would say we apply context for the business leader or the elected official to make those choices, or the OLDA board for that matter. So, in relation to that, how that affects the traffic, there was a traffic study done that was part of the development plan in the property that has a lot of there's still a lot of car traffic that could be tolerated going through the park that would not, impact, that would be within the limits of that development plan. So, as far as that goes, hopefully we'll have lots of office in there, and a lot of employees that are also, there might be some more traffic, but they'll also hopefully be sitting in some of our local merchant shops on Main Street, and, utilizing some of the other amenities we have in the county.
Great. And I got a question offline. I'm not sure if you know the answer, asking if the reserve can be hunted.
It cannot. No, currently that is not allowable.
Okay.
And it can't be used for four-wheeling either. And if you get caught with a four-wheeler out there, it's going to be big trouble.
Good to know.
We're trying to preserve those streams.
That's right.
Yes. So you've mentioned the master plan, different stages of development, and the progress and plans. Where do people go to see this master plan, see the maps and all of that information? There
is a website called oldhamreserve.com that is Hollenbeck Oakley hosts that site, and it has maps on there. I believe there's a picture of the master plan. I'm looking for. I have a copy I can share right now and kind of show you what that looks like. This is again the original master plan. Let me grab it real quick.
Put the link in the chat if people want to copy that.
Make sure this is the right one. Okay, I'll share here. Okay, this is a copy of the original master plan, and you can see where it's broken down into office and commercial use, mixed use neighborhood, single family. You can see the various residential pieces here. There was even a school site that was originally part of the concept. And again, you can see the way this likely ends up. There's a phasing that this would have to go through. So as you follow the growth of the infrastructure, the design of the park, as far as how the development was planned, was that as land was sold, that the revenue from that land would be reinvested into the infrastructure of the park and provide that next step of infrastructure. So based on that concept, we have a wastewater treatment plant here, and we have developability along Eden Parkway and now East Peak Road. And so any future land sales that happen will go towards extending any utilities that we need to have added. So likely you can see this area developing as a phase 1, and then likely a phase 2 here. And then at the point that this begins to develop, we'll likely see that upgrade in the pump station in Lakewood Valley. And then that could, and again, I say pump station in Lakewood Valley, that is not planned. It's just, that's an option for an improvement. And then of course that would bring on, this would be a phase 1, phase 2, and I think this is a phase 3, and then we get into a phase 4 and even a phase 5 as you get down here. And so, that happens. That's plan for that is to have it happen as the land is being sold. But you also run into areas where you find out, the sale proceeds of the Trilogy project did not fully fund the extension of this road, and that road had to be built. So the city and the county actually ended up having to front the difference on the money for the land sales, but that is getting paid back through the release price of the acreage by the master developer. So ultimately, Hollenbach, Oakley, and Hawker will be paying for that road. But you can't get those. It's hard to get people to pay for a road when they don't own property. So the way that the deal had worked out was that the city and the county own the property. Technically, OLDA owns the property, but the city and the county are funding the growth of the property. So that decision to make up that difference on East Peak Road would have been the difference between having a Trilogy site possible or not. Just to give you an example of, we have Eden Parkway, we get an opportunity to get a Trilogy that's going to require a road to be built, and then even the proceeds from the land sales at $250,000 an acre, which is ultimately what that was. I think it was $252,000. Still weren't quite enough to get. That's how expensive it is to build a road. Other questions?
Hey, David,
Yes.
since you've got the map there, why don't you point out where Trilogy is going?
Yes, right around. So, and by the way, this will be a roundabout, the extension of where Eden Parkway and where Peak Road intersect. This will be a roundabout. And so there was kind of a town square concept as the original part of the original master plan. And then right off of that, next to what would be about 5 acres on the corner there, is where Trilogy is going to be constructed. And then again, they're going to have some acreage right along here for the villas. And I'll tell you, it's interesting when you look at the design plan for the road. This is the original master plan, but because the villas were part of the project, the design of the road actually had to kind of kick up here a little bit to create an opening to make enough acreage for something to go along the golf course. That gives us a good example of if we would have gone ahead and built that road before, that we might have crowded out what could have been that villa project. So, there's a lot of kind of it's like throwing a dart sometimes when you're trying to put in some infrastructure. So when I talk to our utility people here and say, we need to get this infrastructure online so we can sell some more land, their question to me is, okay, well, what are you going to sell it to? So we can just tell you what you're going to need there. And it's hard to know because we don't know what we're going to need there. And we can kind of guess, but that gets pretty complicated. And so that's why we have a master developer involved. Other questions?
I'm guessing that answered Magistrate Hawkins' question about where the new company location was going to go. I assume she meant Trilogy. Question about space for a public park. So if that is something that's going to happen, is that going to have to be kind of integrated into that map you just showed?
Probably yes. And I don't know where that might go. For 100 people, just 1 acre for parks. Yeah, I mean, I think I think that's pretty. I would imagine that at least is going to be part of the development would be a 1 acre park.
Okay. And then I guess we're right after 1:30 now. I didn't see any other questions. I hope I didn't miss any ones. So where do people go, or what do they do if they want to kind of find out more or continue to be updated on what's going on?
Well, please feel free to reach out to us here at the chamber. You can email me at david@oldhamcountychamber.com. You can also contact us here at the office, 222-1635. And we're happy to speak to neighborhood groups, to individuals, anybody that needs to know information. We want this to be a transparent project where you understand what's going on with it. It's a very complicated project, which sometimes allows for misinformation to be in the public. And I really feel I'm very compelled to make sure that we correct misinformation every opportunity we get, because this is something that I think the county should be proud of the work that they've done. that they've stuck to the vision of the park and didn't decide to just sell off the lots because we weren't having the desired outcome while we were in the middle of an economic downturn. And also we have this wonderful top employer who's doing a tremendous thing for the county. So I certainly understand lots of people have different ideas about development and what that means. I'm a firm believer that Oldham County is going to continue to develop. And what we can do is try to make sure that the quality of that development is up to a standard that enhances our quality of life. So it's if we do nothing, sometimes people get very upset about public investment. There's a large piece of property off of the interstate that doesn't have sewers to it and has been vacant for a long time. And if we had sewers there, we could have an employer there, the significant employer there. Without sewers there, we're likely going to get mini storage or maybe even a truck stop. And the only thing we can do to say that shouldn't happen is hope that the private landowner doesn't choose to develop that way. But once they're within those regulations, they can do that. What we see as opportunities, and Oldham Reserve is a good example, is that if there was a public investment in some of that infrastructure to key areas in the county, we could potentially prevent some of the types of projects that aren't as desirable and bring in good quality projects that fit with the demographics of the county, which is a really great varying swath of highly educated workers. And not to mention that we pull in about 9,000 people every day to work in other areas of the county. And we rely on that for the growth of our small business as well. So.
Great. Well, let's see. Did we have any other questions?
I'm happy to stay on here as long as you guys have questions. So I don't know if you've got a hard stop or not.
Emphasis to have more than 1 acre for a park, getting that.
Yeah.
Commerce Parkway, is it forgotten?
It is not. In fact, so I think it was December of 18 when Judge Vogel called and said that the federal highways has agreed to do the interchange. And prior to that project, the Economic Development Committee that Fiscal Court has, that's chaired by Magistrate Tice, had been looking at and doing studies on widening Commerce Parkway. Obviously, Commerce is going to have a lot of growth. There's a lot of interest in Commerce Parkway because there's some flat land there. The utilities are there, and then of course a new interchange is going in. There's also a Kroger project that is scheduled for the where Commerce and 393 meet, and that had been on hold until the 393 extension continues forward. The good news is we know that the 393 extension has been funded. Speaker Osborne and former Senator Harris were able to get that back in the transportation budget. So we're hoping that as soon as they start moving dirt on that, Kroger moves forward. If Kroger moves forward, then all of the things that you see around Kroger's will start, Kroger will start to pop up around that. And then you've got Watts Home Center that is putting down some roots. Our drive-in theater has become very popular, which is great. We've got the Holiday Inn Express that went in at the northern end of Commerce Parkway. Also has 2 lots for restaurant parcels. There's everything from car lots that have been interested and even manufacturing. It's a real mix of zoning there, but a lot of different opportunities. And of course, the access gives you 3 interchanges between 22, what will be the future exit 20, and then exit 18. So it's a very popular area, and Commerce will definitely need to be addressed. The reason that was put on hold, the widening of Commerce, was because the design of the interchange was not yet finished. So they decided to hold on moving forward with widening Commerce until we had more information about what does the nature of the design look like. And fortunately, they did that because Commerce is going to have some adjustments made where the interchange on that north side of 71 is going to occur.
Another question just came in asking, are they still going to try to tunnel under the railroad tracks for the 393 interchange?
Yes, that is what they're going to do at 393 and also at Allen Lane. So both of those will be underpasses. And they're designed and they're funded and they're ready to move forward. One of the challenges in dealing with a railroad is that we're kind of at their mercy. So CSX is going to have to make some changes to temporary changes to accommodate the construction. And so my understanding is that we're waiting on those things to move forward.
Okay, well, if we don't have any other questions, and feel free to unmute yourself as well if you prefer, but not hearing any or reading any, I guess we'll stop here. Thank you, David and Kiersten. You both are a wealth of information. I learned so much as well, so I hope this is really helpful for everyone here. And this is being recorded. This will be available on the Curry's Fork page. I'll send it to David for the Oldham Commerce page, and just reach back out to us. We're available to keep this conversation going.
Thanks, everyone.
Yep, thank you very much.
Thanks, guys.